Our next keynote presentation looks into the impact of digital transformation on sporting organisations and international perspective on one part of technology, which is digital. We're extremely privileged to have our next speakers with us today, Tek Yin Lim and Sam Lake of Portas Consulting. Portas Consulting is a global strategy and management consultancy dedicated to the sports and physical activity sectors, having worked extensively with national bodies, federations, teams, clubs, leagues and private investors across the sports sector and across the globe. Combined, Tek and Sam are experienced in leading and shaping transformation agendas and programs for sporting organisations and increasing physical participation to over 70% of the Singapore population. They will present some of their latest work, including benchmarking and assessment of barriers to achieving digital ambitions, case studies and lessons learned from other organisations, and some practical next steps to unlock the potential of digital for sport in New Zealand. Can we please make welcome to the stage Tek Yin Lim and Sam Lake.
Fantastic. Everybody hear me okay? Very good. All right, that's there. Okay, let's just make this one a bit. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Māua te maunga, ko Kaituna te awa, ko Ngāti Ranganui toku iwi. No Papamoa, ahau, ke Singapore toko kāinga ai nei, ko Sam toku ingoa. Tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Really excited and grateful to be here. Fantastic audience and an amazing discussion we're looking forward to having. So, Rowan, thank you. Impressive stuff. Your experience in the sector and your giving back's an amazing achievement, and lots of things for me personally to think about. So just by way of introduction, to sort of set everybody, Portas Consulting, as Jenny May correctly said, we're a strategy and management consultancy dedicated to the sports sector. Okay, that's all we do, that's all we'll ever do. Founded in London on the back of the 2012 London Legacy Program. We now have 5 offices across Singapore, Tokyo, Riyadh, Dubai, and London. About 150 staff, serving sports in more than kind of 200 projects, 40 plus countries, 50 plus sports. As Jenny May said, Tek Yin is here with us somewhere. Put your hand up, Tek. There we are. Very good. There he is. I'll be bringing Tek Yin up for the Q&A and to give a bit of an industry kind of lens at the later on in the session. Myself, I head up our digital and technology business based in Singapore. I've been in Singapore for 5 years now, but born and raised in Papamoa. Studied at the University of Waikato. Was 36 degrees when I left on Friday night, and it definitely wasn't 36 degrees at the rugby on Saturday. Safe to say. So I'm a bit nasally, so I apologise in advance if that comes up later. So, look, we're going to jump into 2 things today, okay? Point number 1, what's going on and what are the challenges facing sport? Yeah? And then point number 2, what are winners doing differently today? What are the things that are making them successful? Some case studies, some examples, and then some practical next steps. We're going to open up for questions. I'll be about 25-ish minutes, and then we're going to have a Q&A with Tek Yin. Please send across any questions, submit anything interesting you'd like to find out more. So let's jump into it. We see 5 macro trends shaping the world around us. Rowan sort of just alluded to the emerging technology space, but there's significantly shifting demographics. Yeah? Active aging, there's a demographic bubble we're in the middle of where we've got an entire generation actively trying to stay healthy. We've got significant health impacts for that. And then you've got Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and the rest of them coming in with a completely different mindset and completely different behaviours. The spending environment, obviously, has changed. Yeah, interest rates are going up. Capital is harder to come by. Investment is a challenge, yeah? and it's everybody's seeing it. And also, outside of the public sphere, the changes in the way in which rights and media are being consumed has fundamentally reshaped what is value for sports and how can sports extract value from that. Consumer expectations have wildly evolved. Digital, personalised, sustainable services, inclusive services increasingly. And obviously the geopolitical environment as well. Sport has become a tool for diplomacy. Sport has become a tool for geopolitics. And that's got some pretty significant implications for organisations in this room as well, which we'll jump into. So we saw the right-hand side of this graph a little bit earlier. But the key, I guess the interesting thing here is we live in an age of convergence. Okay? Every great revolution that's happened in history has been driven by this force. The mobile 3G consumer device internet and mixed media was sort of the start of that for us. And it's not going anywhere. Technology is moving faster than ever. More and more people are online. There is more data being created today than at any point in history in its entirety. Yeah? We can support entirely new means of delivering services across the globe. And the big question to think about is what is the implication of that? But really, it's very, very simple. Very simple. And if anybody says it's not simple, there's probably an alternative agenda around software sales, one would suspect. Technology lets us do two things. Number one, improves our productivity. Improves the quantity of outcomes or lowers the cost of those outcomes per unit. Number two, improves our performance. That's it. Yeah? This doesn't have to be a complicated, long-winded conversation. Technology does two things for us. It improves our productivity and it improves our performance, and that's it. If technology is not doing one of those things, we're not using it in the right way. We've seen this in sport. Today, sports technology, very conservatively estimated about somewhere between $15 and $30 billion market, depending on who you talk to. You're seeing multiple different cases where viewership, engagement, commercial outcomes, cost to serve, the ability to drive very different products and services is becoming a key component. And it's only going one way. This is not going anywhere. This trend is going to increase. Again, very conservatively, 2030, $100 billion plus market for sports technology. Digitization of the sector. It is an enormous opportunity. It is an enormous risk. And it's an amazing gateway to change the way we think about what we deliver. But this isn't easy. I suspect this audience probably will agree. Who is surprised by these stats? 1 in 200 IT projects deliver the intended benefits on time and within budget. Does that surprise anybody? Okay. Costs in general in the public sector IT balloon by 70%, usually delayed by about 46%, and the benefits in general shrink by about 39% from before you started the process. So this is from McKinsey, a global study that they completed 2022, and is it's not surprising, is it? Which is a real shame. Frankly, it's a real shame because it shouldn't be as hard as it is. And we shouldn't be in a position where this is how we think about technology for the sector. But the reality is this gap between expectations and reality is evident everywhere. In sport, specifically. Last year, esports was the shining light for the future. Yeah, it was. Esports has got an interesting time ahead of it. Okay? The role of esport in things like the Olympic movement is becoming a significant question. Who remembers the conversation where everybody would have a wearable device that would proactively help our health and well-being, right? I suspect everybody's got a wearable device, but I would question whether or not we're getting the best health and well-being outcomes from those wearable devices as a society and as a community. The interesting point here is this value realization gap. We've recently completed a global study alongside Microsoft, working with a lot of our global clients. 76, I think, major sporting organizations responded to this study globally. We partnered with Microsoft and the Global Sports Innovation Center to kind of package this up. So we're going to jump into a little bit of that research. What's happened? What is this value gap and why? 3 primary factors emerge from this study. Number 1, digital strategy and plans, or the complete lack of. Number 2, digital infrastructure and investments targeted at very short-term objectives as opposed to long-term capability building. And number 3, our organisations are not ready for the change, are not necessarily ready for what's coming. So first up, 88% of the organisations who responded have a digital theme, some description in their mission, in their vision, their aspiration, their strategy. 75% of those expect investment in digital to increase. Yeah? Sounds reasonable. Does that resonate with this group? Generally? A few nodding heads. 30% of those have an actual strategic plan for digital, a dedicated, thoughtful, well-articulated approach to what they're going to do about it. Now, this has got 2 major implications that we see. Number 1, very superficial implementation of the next shiny thing, the next interesting thing. Number 2, a lack of considered thought between what you're doing now, what you were doing in the past, and a complete lack of integration between the way and that's thought about. This has led directly to value realization challenges. It's led directly to fatigue in employees and in consumers, frankly. And it's created this, again, to the earlier point from McKinsey, it's created a very negative perception of the role of technology. Number 2, digital infrastructure reflecting very short-term goals, not any form of long-term vision. 50% of the companies that we surveyed invested over $500,000 in the last 12 months in innovation or technology type programs. What's interesting when you look at those in terms of the things they've invested in, starting at the top, the most significant investment category was digital asset upgrades. Yeah, get a new website, fix the app, et cetera, et cetera. What you don't see in here is data infrastructure or enabling organizational development, training programs, leveraging capabilities from the market, developing partnerships. Yeah, very, very specific point solutions without necessarily a clearly articulated approach or plan as to what you're going to do about them. Success, as we see in digital, requires really 3 things. Number 1, very clear vision. Number 2, a willing organization. And number 3, the enabling data and digital infrastructure to do something with all of this information that's all around us. When we're not investing in that, it's very hard to be able to do that. And number 3, our organizations are not equipped to deal with this. We're not in a place to do it. 95% of the respondents to the study said that capacity was one of their top 3 barriers. Time, people. The classic innovator's dilemma. Mentioned Kodak earlier. You're focusing on today's problem so much that you forget that you might not exist tomorrow if you don't fix some of these other opportunities. %45% of the organizations we studied identified funding as the number 1 barrier. Again, probably resonates, not overly surprising, and probably justified when you look at the complete failure of a lot of IT programs to deliver the value that they've proposed. But what gets interesting is if you talk about value and if you look at what could be achieved, funding really should be a no-brainer. If you can increase the number of units of service you deliver at a lower cost, if you can increase the quality of the units of service you deliver through digital technology, the business case will write itself. The question is, why do we not think we can achieve that? And then thirdly, and probably most importantly, 57% of the organizations that responded have absolutely no strategy to deal with digital talent. Recruitment policies, practices, the legacy we have in our organizations means we struggle to identify and hire and nurture the young digital native talent that you need to deliver services in this environment. Gen Z are emerging as their own category now, coming out from under the wing of their parents, and they're starting to spend money. But they have a very different idea of what's valuable and how to use it. I applaud the Sport New Zealand internship program that I was privileged to work with Olivia and some of the team on a project with Brent last year, and their ability to bring insight, perspective, capacity to that challenge was really, was very impressive. Now, we can argue that the private sector's got all the incentives to resolve these problems themselves. Yeah, they like to make money from us. They like to make data from us. They'll fix these problems in the private sector. The public sector, however, only accelerates these problems. We leverage governance and structures that were designed for a very different age, for a very different set of users. Funding, obviously heavily publicly funded, and we struggle to articulate the value to other funders. Delivery models, traditionally centered around what's worked really well in the past for us, not necessarily what the next generation of consumers might be able to deliver. And our internal capability and systems to solve some of these problems don't necessarily exist. But digital could completely transform the way in which we deliver our core activities, can deliver them more efficiently at a higher value. Promoting physical activity, participation, govern and regulate the ecosystem, leverage high performance programs, all of these things are things that technology will absolutely do, and they are directly aligned to the goals and objectives of the organization. We've, in the last 2 years, we did a quick count, we've served more than 10 ministries globally, sports ministries. Okay, this type of question is absolutely top of mind for all of our public sector clients, all of them. How do we fund types of projects? How do we develop our organization? What is our strategy to have talent to be able to deliver services in this new world? What capabilities do we need? How can we collaborate better and engage the private sector? All right. As a point of reference, we've been privileged enough to work with the Ministry of Sport in Saudi Arabia on their sports digitization strategy. This is targeted at 2040. What is the sports sector? What is a digital-first sports sector in 2040? To achieve 3 things: compete on the world stage, improve the health and well-being of its citizens, accelerate sport as a direct contributor of GDP. A digital sports economy in 2040 is that's their thing, national level strategy. But what gets interesting is I think some of us already probably feel this. Who inherently, quick show of hands, feels like that gap on that graph on the left there represents the world around them today? Our organizations aren't necessarily keeping up with the volume of technology. Quick show of hands that, yes, we agree with this. Good. So let's have a look at what's actually happening. Technology is changing. Individuals, you as an individual, are using technology probably. I imagine most of you have used ChatGPT at some point. You probably use social apps. You're probably using, Ubers and et cetera. But that doesn't trickle down. We don't keep up as an organization, and this becomes a significant challenge, and this is what we see happening today. Technology is going one direction. Our businesses are not necessarily ready, equipped, capable, have a strategy to support it. And we end up in this position where you've got very fundamental changes to the world around you and an organization that's not necessarily ready for them. So, wrapping up this implications and kind of barriers section, right? 3 things leveraging digital is going to achieve. Number 1, it's going to transform your customer experience. Yeah, you can deliver better services at a higher quality using digital, no question about it. Number 2, it's going to transform your operational delivery. Yeah, how do you deliver services? What's the cost to deliver those services? What are the levers and the platforms that you use? And number 3, it can transform your business model. As Rowan correctly pointed out, a digital-first, digital-native business is very, very, very easy to do today. I can go and start streaming whatever I want to say to a global audience for $0. Yeah, I can do that today. Anybody in this room can do that if you've got a perspective. What does that mean for our sports sector? What does that mean when we rely on very legacy, very traditional models of content delivery to monetize big parts of our sector? So, given that, what do we think winners are doing differently today? Just quickly grab water. broadly, yeah, there's 5 basic categories of technology for the sector. There's performance technology, there's engagement technology, there's delivery technology, and there's facility, venue technology, and there's organizational technology. Yeah? This is broadly the ecosystem of things that we can do in technology. John Persico, who's here, a good friend and collaborator, will be helping us out with the workshop later today, has done a significant amount of thinking in this space and developed an education platform targeting these sectors. Yeah? But the interesting point is that all of them have multiple use cases, as you would expect. There's a bunch of stuff you could do. There's a lot of stuff. Yeah? There's a new sports economy driven by data, and it's a fundamental challenge to try and keep up. And the thesis we're going to talk to now is the idea that you don't necessarily have to keep up. You have to get your organization to a point where you can engage meaningfully in the right way with the right types of outcomes, articulate very clearly what those outcomes are, and how technology is going to contribute to them. What's really interesting about those sort of 5 broad categories, and obviously this is quite a simplified view of the world, high performance data, the volume of data that's captured and the complexity of that data, biometric monitoring for multiple different sensors in a multi-year campaign, significant. But the real value is when you get to complex stakeholder relationships that aren't actually that complicated to manage the data for and aren't complicated to use the data. That's going to drive significant value realization. The future of sports is going to be defined by the intersection of these categories. The challenge of value realization is where it gets very real. Yeah? So we're going to talk to sort of a case study for each of these technology types, what an organization has done really well and what their key success factors were. Number 1, hurts my heart a little bit. Cricket Australia, far and away one of the most established high-performance, data-driven programs in the world in this space. And a well-established end-to-end digital strategy across the organization. Leadership invest, staff lean in, and you can see some of the results. Their key success factors, 3 things. Very, very, very clear articulation right at the top. We will be driven by digital technology, and we will invest in digital technology. Leadership, staff, players and coaches, grassroots programs driven by technology. And number 2, very, very proactive partnering, interestingly enough. Going to partners in the ecosystem and asking to pilot, asking to test, asking to learn. The thing about software companies is they want the data. Yeah? They want the data. So they will generally give you a pilot because they want the data. They'll generally engage with you because they want the data. So there are ways and means to leverage technology, test, learn, pilot that don't necessarily have to cost as much. Number 2, Sports Singapore. Teck Yin can talk to this significantly more. A fascinating case in my view. So the mission of Sports Singapore, for those who aren't aware, is for Singapore to live better through sport. Yeah, live better through sport, not win, not necessarily live better. And this is increasingly being reflected in direct, sustained digital investments. ActiveSG have just launched an app, as we like to do. But the interesting point with that app started with a very, very, very clear articulation of outcomes. Yeah? Detailed assessment of the barriers to participation. Facility access being identified as one of the primary barriers. A measurable and influenceable barrier as well. And then defining the digital-first booking, facility optimization, planning type solution. Significant investment in the back end and the analytics and the infrastructure. Have they absolutely got it right? Hard to say. Are they proactively looking at how they deliver an outcome through a technology tool? Absolutely. And it's setting them up for success because they've made the investment in the infrastructure to solve the outcome. The technology itself is interesting. Teck Yin can talk significantly more about it shortly. But the point is that investing in the assessment of the problem, what are we trying to solve? How do we solve that problem? And then coming to a technology answer is an incredibly powerful way to go about having these conversations. Looking globally, I imagine, quick show of hands, who here knows Manchester City football? Good. Who here knows who owns Manchester City football? Less hands. Good. So the City Football Group are a pretty interesting example of this. So City Football Group owns football assets on every continent in the world. Yeah? Just consider, they own a football asset, club, team, development paths, academies, etc., in every single continent. And they have a well-defined multi-club ownership strategy and the supporting fan engagement and digital infrastructure to support that. This means they can take data from the Melbourne Victory, yeah, and influence decisions they make on their fans in Europe. They can take data from India and influence decisions they make in the MLS in the USA. Yeah? Now the point here is recognizing we live in a data-rich world, and people who have the most data and use it well will win. Yeah? The leverage and scale of data is an increasingly powerful tool. And how do you create more data? How do you create more relevant, interesting, insightful data that you can directly use for different audiences? Is a significant challenge. I mean, imagine a thought case here. The Blues, the Aces, Auckland FC, the Breakers, the Mystic, you know, maybe even the Warriors. Maybe that's a different conversation. I don't know. Imagine if instead of competing for a fan base, you could create a shared data infrastructure and then proactively identify opportunities to better leverage, commercialize, activate that shared fan base, because it's probably very good chance it's the same people with similar problems. Yeah. Again, this model works. It's well developed. But the point is, they recognize the problem, get more data, get more interesting data, yeah? And then come up with a solution to support that, solving that problem, which is a multi-club ownership strategy, with an underlying data infrastructure to then make better decisions and proactively drive better outcomes. If we look at SoFi Stadium, again, the USA is a long way in front of most nations in terms of stadium digitization. But the interesting point here, day zero, that facility, the focus of that facility was digital. It was designed as a digital-first stadium because it recognized the fact that they need to engage a totally different group of consumers in a very proactive and meaningful way. This isn't anymore turn up to the game, buy a ticket, go home, or average of 3 tickets a year, et cetera, right? This is a multi-use, multi-purpose stadium that will deliver, you know, 2 50,000-seat games in a day. Yeah, the latest thing they've, you know, I don't know if you've seen it, but the plan is to put a pool into SoFi for LA 28. Yeah, and then take it back out to do other stuff. Now, the fact you can do that with technology is pretty incredible, right? But the reason they've executed on that is twofold. Number one, a very, very clear vision and aspiration to use technology to drive very specific outcomes. Yeah? And number two, again, there's a theme here, piloting effectively with technology companies, becoming a pilot site for technology companies to test and learn. You know, you've now got technology companies like Cisco coming to SoFi and asking to test the stuff. So that becomes a really beneficial conversation. You've got the stadium, get some insights, get some IP, get some data. But at the same time, the software companies and the hardware companies can leverage that test bed and that learning environment to develop their own more advanced solutions. Interesting, surprising, or not surprising, depending on how much you've been involved in this conversation, organization case studies, Saudi Arabian football. So those who aren't aware, Saudi Arabia has 196 football clubs. Okay, 196 football clubs. The Ministry of Sport have made a pretty clear decision. They're no longer just football clubs, they're now multi-sport clubs. Those multi-sport clubs are being incentivized to deliver programs and services across the priority sports from the ministry. And they're driving that through fundamentally a digital-first vision. The Digital 2040 strategy has a very, very explicit set of outcomes they're trying to achieve. Those outcomes lead to technology decisions. The technology doesn't lead the conversation. Technology isn't the point. The problem is the point. Yeah? The outcome you're trying to achieve is the point. You can see there, I don't know who here would like 4,000 hours of volunteer effort reduced in their organization. I imagine some of you. Yeah? Through effective, well-intentioned design of digital-first volunteering solutions for those clubs, suddenly you've achieved a very explicit outcome that you can measure and you can value and you can make a business case against. The technology itself has only very recently been defined. Yeah? This started as a vision, an aspiration, a set of objectives, a very explicit problem to solve, and has led to a technology solution. We think what we've seen globally, we will continue to miss expectations without very clearly defining some of these aspects. Number one, everybody in this room is great at this. What are you trying to achieve? Yeah? What are you trying to achieve? What's the problem you're solving? Who's the user you're serving? What's the behavior you want to change? Question number one. Question number two, what do we prioritize and who owns it? Again, this is pretty familiar, pretty self-explanatory. Question number three, what technology might support that? Number four, how do we set up our organizations for success? How do we remove barriers? And then number five, how do we actually deliver? Now, most organizations do 3 and 5 when they're talking about technology and completely miss the stuff they're actually already really good at, right? You guys, we are good at understanding what we're trying to achieve. We're good at prioritizing. But these are not technology problems. These are people problems. These are user problems. These are stakeholder problems. Getting very explicit about that, leading to a potential technology solution. Maybe technology isn't the answer, right? Sometimes the simple things could be easier. The point and the key kind of, I guess, opportunity is value realization will come from understanding the problems you're trying to solve and identifying different types of technology that you can leverage as a tool to help you solve those problems. Technology is not the answer. Yeah? Technology, it might not be the right way to go about delivering it. Yeah? Understanding the problem, though, understanding the value proposition, you can then identify potential interventions that could be supported by technology to increase efficiency or improve quality. So 4 key points, and then we're going to open up for questions. I'll bring Tekin onto the stage, can share some of his experience and his insights in the Singapore context specifically and the global work that we've been doing. Digital's here to stay. Yeah, whether we like it or not, whether we believe it or not, whether we want to engage with it or not, it's here to stay. Your role as stewards of the ecosystem needs to be to understand what's coming, understand how it can help you, and try and deliver that. Technology is not the answer. It's a tool. It's a tool like any other tool. It's a tool like a pen and paper was. Technology is a means for you to be better at delivering your services. Yeah? Anybody who's saying that their technology is the only technology, or this specific technology is the only technology, right, has a slightly different agenda. You have problems, you use tools to solve those problems, and then you have outcomes that you want to achieve. Technology is simply a tool. There's 5 very broad categories in an ever-changing list. They all do the same thing. Yeah? Improve efficiency or improve performance. You're not going to keep up with the latest evolution in AR coming out of Palo Alto. You're not, right? Nobody is. But you don't have to, because you understand the problems you're trying to solve and the aspiration that you have for the use of technology in your organization. Number 4, winners are doing 3 things really, really well. They've got a clear digital strategy. They invest in enabling capabilities and enabling their organization and developing talent. And they understand the value they're trying to unlock through digital technology. So with that, thank you. Grateful to share some of that work we've been doing. As you can imagine, there's a lot more. It's a very simple kind of run through. We've got a workshop after the lunch break where we'll be digging into some of these topics a bit more and helping sort of facilitate those tools. Those QR codes there will send us an email if anybody wants to have any questions, but floor is open. We've got 24 minutes remaining in this session. I'll invite Tetkin up to the stage as well to kind of guide us through that. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Sam. Has anybody got any questions just in the initial part? No. Okay, so what I want you to do, I've just had a quick chat with Tech, Sam, is if we just spend the next 2 to 3 minutes and at your table just have a quick conversation and come up with a question from your table. Of course, I might not get round to all of you, but have a quick conversation at your table about what's the best way we can get some information out of these guys, specific to those of the organisation sitting at your table. So if we do that for about 2 or 3 minutes, if you've got a question, formulate a question, and then throw your hand up and I'll come around with the mic. So 2 or 3 minutes, let's go. Kia ora tātou. Thank you too.
All good?
About 1 more minute. Okay, kia ora tātou. Good to hear a lot of chatting going on. So we've had a couple of questions through. Kia ora tātou. We've had a couple of questions come through on the app, and one of them is around whether Sam and Tech have actually got an example of an organisation successfully using technology or social media to increase physical activity or sport uptake. So I'll throw that at you two.
A very good morning to everybody, and I just want to say before I answer any of the questions, thank you for warmly welcoming Sam and me here to join you at Connections. It's a wonderful thing that you're doing, and I want to commend Raylene and the entire team for putting this together. When Sam spoke a little bit about the ActiveSG app, some background, ActiveSG was conceptualized as a national public sports club up to the point in 2011 and 2012 when we were thinking about how to better engage Singaporeans for physical activity and sport. we were running public sports facilities, and people used to come to the facilities to use them. You could call in to make a booking. You could go to our website and make a booking, or you could show up physically at the sports center to make a booking. And we decided that that was, number one, a little bit archaic in the sense that it took us a massive effort to try and organize the data around that. And we didn't really know who was coming and who else was playing. And the idea that we were engaging and developing and nurturing a community was not enabled by that simple transaction system. And so we created the construct of a national public sports club that will not just make facilities available, but would increasingly develop programs to engage every demographic segment of our population. And so ActiveSG was born, and we did what appeals to most Singaporeans, and that is we gave everybody $100 worth of credit to sign up. And when I first went to the Ministry of Finance and said, I want to give everybody $100, they sort of fell off their chair and said, well, that's a massive budget, where are you going to get the cash from? And I said, well, it's going to be everything to do with sunk costs. It's not cash, it's credit. Whether people come to my swimming pool or to my gym or not, I still carry those overheads. Of course, there will be revenue lost from some of the bookings, and we had a policy of being able to use, you could take 30% of a facility booking from your credit, but that would be much reduced when you think about it. So we got that started, and within the first year of launching ActiveSG, we had 700,000 signups. And from that first year onwards, membership signups continued to grow. There was far greater outreach to schools and youth to get them on board so that they would grow up knowing that there was an ActiveSG that they could come to. And today, as it sits, we cover, I think, latest about 2.2 million Singaporeans, which is about 2/3 of the population. In truth, not all 2/3 are active and are participating, but the app has given us a very strong sense of the level of engagement of people with Sports Singapore's facilities and programs. One of the things that the app allowed us to do was to sort of create digital games. And so we created all manner of regular walking challenges to sort of promote physical activity. And what happens is you obviously score points, we gamify the whole thing. We work with partners in Singapore, and we have a heritage trail walk, where if you walk on this heritage trail and you get down to capturing the QR codes, you get points. We worked with the zoological gardens to do the same, plant QR codes all over the zoo. And if you go through the Mandai zoological gardens, you likewise walk and capture that. And we created these games fairly regularly, and then you qualify for a lucky draw. And as I said, Singaporeans respond to that kind of thing, and you could opt for iPads, shopping vouchers, whatever have you. But the most surprising thing that came out of that for us is that whenever we ran a game, we had about 150,000 people sign up for the game, right? And as we began to examine the data around the 150,000 people, they were not regular users of our sports centers. So they weren't playing badminton, tennis, going to the gym or swimming, but they were engaged with the app. Obviously, there was a little bit of a marketing effort that needed to go out, and there needed to be a provision of other sorts of services on the app that enabled them to feel that it was something useful for them to remain signed on. So whether it was the $100 credit freebie that they could transfer from parent to child or from their sister to the brother or vice versa, or whether it was because there were telemedicine services that were made available on the app and you could use part of that credit for telemedicine, or whether it's because you could get a good, simple mass insurance policy from one of the insuring companies that offered a service on the app. These were all the sort of things that kept people engaged. And the digital games that we played, or the gamification on that app, enabled us to sort of reach out to people that we would otherwise not have been able to reach out to. But the most important thing, as Sam sort of alluded to, is it gave us a lot more data than what we previously had. We began to know where people played versus where they lived, how far people were willing to travel in order to participate. Who were they participating with? Were they participating with people likely from their own company? Does the data sort of show that kind of grouping? Or would they be participating largely with their friends and families living in the same neighborhood? It gives you the opportunity then to create the type of programs that will enable you to innovate in some of your outreach. In Singapore, one of the biggest things that matter to us is whether the different racial groups are coming out and are representative in our community spaces. And one of the more difficult to reach groups are quite typically the Muslim community that tend to gravitate around activities in the mosque. And so while we knew that as a fact and could begin to intervene more directly to attract them to the sports center, it was really the app that began to tell us whether we were making progress with mixing, with people coming up to participate with other races, other groups. And that was very useful for us from a policy-making perspective. Everything from thinking about policies regarding allowable swimwear to how Muslim women might feel more welcome. We obviously looked at the data and said, let's go and study a particular group that appears to be more successful. Let's do a deep dive, and then let's see how we can replicate policy elsewhere. Up to this point in time, I think Sport Singapore has contracted Portas in order to drive a stronger modeling around the work that we do and the effect on the KPIs. And again, the app has been a very important source of data and insight that we've been able to use. But specifically to the point of using the technology to activate and encourage physical activity, a lot of that was driven around the gamification.
Yeah, I think the key point there in our experience has been the identification of the problem, access to facilities, use of facilities, then driving a very intentional technology-driven solution, yeah? But identifying the problem, understanding the problem, and having the vision first was the key kind of component. Floor's open.
Brilliant, thank you. So, any questions? Anybody want to put their hand up? Yes, okay, here we go. Getting too old for this, but here we go.
Hey both. Got a digital product in my organisation right now. When we did a strategy review, and actually Ed Bartley helped us looking at our digital strategy as well. A lot of us will have this in our organisations. My staff just telling me they've got no time, and I quickly sort of surmised that someone who works in Christchurch covering Timaru to Nelson meant he was spending a lot of time in his car, and a lot of our staff are. So we developed a digital product for our inclusion training in school, a micro-based learning app called CoachMate. And you're right, Sam, really easy to get piloted. They're quite keen to get the data, give you a bit of a discount at first, but in 2 or 3 years, the money starts to ratchet up. Just any examples of how you then, and I'm hoping the answer does lie in the data, how you start to then monetize that app to cover your costs. I don't need it to be great if it made me money, but I need it to wipe its face, because a lot of the time in the sports sector, we can't pass that cost on to the user because it just generally creates another barrier. So you're right, lots of these great things out there. any advice, probably that sits outside of Shake's pocket. Any examples outside of that that you found where you can use that data to generate money to at least pay for the technical?
Absolutely. I think the key point there is to come back to the reason you use technology. Yeah. It will either increase your efficiency or increase your quality. It'll do one of those two things. And the cost out business case can be equally as strong as the net new revenue business case if you have the data to support the services that you're delivering and how much they cost and what quality they are and where they're delivered, etc. So to your point, absolutely. The developing the data, having access to the data, having the infrastructure to use that data to make interesting decisions, the efficiency business case can be incredibly powerful. But I would hazard a guess, we don't currently know, in most cases, how to do that, because we don't know the level of effort that to your point, right, our person in Christchurch has to go through, and his productive hours out of 40 are 15, for example. And so you take his salary and you take 75% of it, and suddenly you've got a relatively interesting business case, right? But the only way you can do that is if you've got data to support the decision and to support the conversation about how much this stuff costs, what is the cost to serve? What is the effort? What is the value you create? So the data can drive a very interesting decision about outcomes and about value. And again, the technology itself is kind of irrelevant. The point is you have increased the efficiency of the organization and you've got data to back that conversation up. And frankly, particularly in the current economic climate, cost out business cases are probably going to be more effective in some environments than net new business cases. Thanks, Tom.
I don't know whether I'll be answering your question directly, but again, back to the app and the data that we had. Given that it was a big digital push, it allowed us to think about new revenue streams around traditional contracts that we were running at our sports centers. And I'll give you just one simple example, and that was with respect to vending machines. Because I had a digital capability and that every person coming to the sports center would have to use that app, we went to the vending machine companies who were selling drinks and food and said to them, we'd like to make digital payment on your vending machines, make your vending machines digital capable. Now at that time, every vending machine was still using coins and dollar bills. And they were reluctant at the beginning because it was a cost. But we said we're fairly confident that if we did this, the total volume of sales would go up. And it was true. The moment they installed those digital capabilities on the vending machine, sales on those machines went up by an order of magnitude. And that allowed us to strike a completely different contract with these companies. And then it applied to lockers, it applied to sponsors at our facilities, because we could tell them exactly what kind of eyeballs they were getting. And it just has a lot of spin-off additional value that could be added to your list and to help us drive revenue. Associated with that data was also, as I said earlier on, the kind of programs that we began to recognize were more popular, something that we needed to create, and our program revenue started to climb as a result of being able to look at that data and begin to shape the entire offerings in that space. So a rather indirect way of gaining new revenue streams.
Any other questions? I have one here on the app, and I think this is probably one that we can wrap things up with. And it's just more around the collaboration. How do we get collaboration throughout the sector so we all don't have to recreate the wheel, especially in the increasing participation and improving health outcomes space. Thank you, Phil.
Great question. The big question, really, isn't it? Look, I think my perspective on that, and looking at a lot of the organizations that we work with globally, the role of, so digital will let you collaborate better and will let you create different styles of partnerships and will enable you to achieve new things, right? It's pretty self-explanatory. The point about partnerships is that the people who win in the future will be those who have the right data that they can effectively use at the right volume and scale to make good decisions. Yeah? Now, how do you get volume and scale from data? You collaborate. Does that increase the size of the pie for everybody? Yes, very much so. If all of the organizations in this room, if you could come up with an overarching, data and sort of a data strategy to leverage the shared insight that you all generate in your own organizations, you could have a very different conversation about funding, I'm sure. You could have a different conversation about opportunities to engage new audiences. You could have a different conversation about the role of technology in the ecosystem. But again, it comes back to the point of the outcome. Yeah? The vision and the outcome is get more access to more interesting data to make better decisions, be able to use that data to do stuff, yeah, to make your organizations better. And scale and volume of data is a key differentiator to anybody being successful in this space. And across the ecosystem, you've absolutely got the scale and volume. As individuals, you probably don't. So it becomes a relatively simple equation if you can justify the need to make better decisions and to support an enabling architecture for that. That conversation starts to become very evident because you all would be better off with more access and more insight.
I've got a slightly different answer from Sam. In my experience, having your own app is a big ego thing. We're not the only community-based organization in public service in Singapore. There is one called the People's Association that has a big drive to reach, again, all Singaporeans in all communities and constituencies. And they started to develop their app to engage the population very much the way that we did. There's the Health Promotion Board that wanted to have their all singing and dancing Health 365 app that would capture all physical activity on that app and provide you supermarket vouchers and all kinds of other incentives for you to walk in the National Walking Challenge. And it required the public service to think about a governing body for government technology, and they're called GovTech. And GovTech has become the agency with the authority and the power to make sure that the government as a whole, the public service and all the associated technology that is used in our partnership with the ecosystem to not act so stupidly. And a lot has been a very painful and to some extent expensive lesson. But at the same time, that sense of the early push before the inception of GovTech provided a lot of very valuable lessons learned on how to create and innovate. So the bigger question really is around who's going to stand up to say we are the authority with the mandate to look across the board and have everybody align to key policies with respect to digitalization as a strategy and how the data will be collected and used and shared. Even the sharing of data is no simple conversation to have, because the more data you have, the more powerful you are in many instances, right? And to a large extent, sometimes you use you create your evidence out of your data to make your case. So I think the important thing is to make sure that there is somebody that's going to stand up to say, we are responsible, and we have that mandate to be able to cut across the ecosystem, particularly between government and national sport organizations.
I think that's a brilliant place to end things. Thank you both so much for your expertise and your insight. Please put your hands together and say thank you to Teck Yin Lim and Sam Lake. And thank you, Julie, for presenting those gifts as well. It's your pen too, otherwise I'll take it. Yeah, thank you. Actually, Teck Yin and Sam are part of the concurrent sessions that we're going to be having after lunch. So there are those 3 sessions. One is the digital technology in sport with Teck and Sam, and also John from Sports Tech College. The second one is Web3, the changing world of sports, fandom and the internet with Leanne Batts, president of Rugby DAO. I actually had to look that up. Decentralised autonomous organisation. Is that right, Leanne? I don't know if Leanne's in the... Yeah, that's it. Brilliant. Self-governing digital online communities with a common goal. It's fascinating. And then the third one is Adapt, Include, Empower with Laura Thompson, ONZM, co-founder and director of AHE. So those 3 concurrent sessions will be happening after lunch. You will have chosen which ones that you do want to attend, and then we will be back in here at 2 o'clock for the next keynote speaker, which is Francis Valentine, presenting on artificial intelligence. It is now time for lunch, so I'll just do a quick karakia before we head off to bless our kai. Nau mai ngā hua o papa ahure warangi nui ki te kai, whi te ki kia ora, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. See you back here at 2 o'clock.